That concludes the CEO report. At this point, I just want to remind everybody that if you're interested in scheduling a time block during office hours with a board member, please call the board office at 773-553-1600. We are pleased to offer this opportunity in addition to these monthly meetings. Madam Secretary, please share the details for the next board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next board meeting will be held on February 26, 2014. Advanced registration will open at 8 a.m. Monday, February 17, 2014, and will close on Friday, February 21st, 2014 at 5 p.m. or until all slots are filled, whichever is first. If anyone has any questions about this process, please contact the board office for our assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Let us now proceed with today's public participation session. We have with us today a significant number of officials who want to speak to us, and I want to say we appreciate your willingness to come and share your thoughts on our deliberations today, and we look forward to hearing from each of you. There is a large number of you, and I hope you'll forgive me if I just go down the list in the order that they were provided to me. With that, I would like to start with Alderman Sposato from the 36th Ward. Alderman.
Excuse me, Mr. President, I wasn't expecting to be first. I was told by people that I have had here, we get notice to come up and speak, so can I maybe be second?
You want more?
We got a lot of people on the 15th floor, so I don't know how tough it's going to be to get them down here.
Looks like they're on their way, Alderman.
Okay, all right, they're out there.
We'll give you a minute to get them all here,
All right,
though.
well, thank. I don't want to.
Take your
I don't
time
want
until
to
they
make
all
this
get
meeting
here.
any longer than it's already going to be. So. One of my colleagues was suggesting to call Jimmy John. So
I think it's your fellow officials who are probably more impatient than we are up here. We've learned to be patient.
okay.
Do you have more? Because we can wait a little bit. For CPS, Abigail, are there more upstairs coming down?
That's all right. We're fine.
Okay.
Okay,
well, you have them all. Alderman.
First of all, thank you, President Vitale and board members, for giving me this opportunity to speak here today. As you know, my name is Nicholas Sposato. I'm Alderman of the 36th Ward. I do have a prepared statement that I'm going to read, and I didn't want to speak off the cuff, and I didn't want to be critical of anything, but I had a tough time standing there listening to the CPS report about we're building a high school 6.5 miles away from a crowded high school. I don't understand the thinking with that. So Taft High School, we're building a high school at Grand and Laramie for a high school that's Nagel and the Expressway. I don't really understand that. There's 4 high schools within 1.5 miles from this proposed site. So I'll go on to read my statement. For many years now, I have been very closely involved with my community school. As a volunteer at my 2 daughters' school, as a 6-year member of local school council for Sayre Language Academy, and now as alderman of the 36th Ward. Since first being elected in 2011, I have been very concerned with the expansion of charter schools, not just on the northwest side, but all over Chicago. For years now, we have heard reports, For years now, we have heard reports of CPS's financial struggles. Even as the city sat on large TIF surpluses, CPS moved forward with a plan to close 50 schools. The explanation we received was that closed schools were underutilized and draining resources from communities where we have large population increases. The community I was elected to represent is one of the areas that has seen rapid growth in the last 10 years, and many of our schools are in need of resources to meet these new demands. Unfortunately, what has happened since the mass school closures is the budgets at these schools have been reduced, and they are being asked to do more with less. Now we are here discussing the possibility of spending what few financial resources CPS has to expand the number of privately run charter schools that operate with little or no oversight in our city. When this request for proposal began, when this request for proposal process began, I was very alarmed by the number of potential new charter schools CPS was seeking to approve. We had just seen 50 schools close and their doors. We had just seen 50 schools close their doors, and CPS was asking for proposals from 21 new charter schools run by private companies to fill that void. 50 schools were closed due to underutilization, yet there is enough of an overcrowding problem to require this large charter expansion. There seem to be many questions about this process going unanswered, and that why I have been a vocal opponent to this proposal to expand charter schools, and more specifically, the proposed new Noble Charter School on Grand Avenue. During the community hearing process for the new charter school on Grand Avenue, I heard strong community opposition. The site that Noble Charter School has chosen is 1 block from Prosser Career Academy and within a mile and a half of 4 schools. Why would CPS consider approving a charter school on the same block as an existing school? When they build police stations, do they build them across the street from existing police stations? When they build libraries, do they build them across the street from existing libraries? So then why is CPS even considering a proposal to open a charter school across the street from Prosser? The Neighborhood Advisory Council, set up to provide CPS with honest feedback from the community, was run by a charter advocate, Stand for Children, who was openly lobbying members of the Neighborhood Advisory Council for their support. After speaking with members of the Neighborhood Advisory Council, I have come away with the opinion that these community hearings were a farce and that CPS was turning a deaf ear to parents, teachers, and residents of Chicago, many of whom are here today in hopes of being heard by the members of this board. What proponents of charter school expansion want us to believe is today's vote is about providing a choice to parents who don't want to send their children to existing CPS schools. I take issue with this argument. Parents in our communities are not Parents in our communities are not looking for choice, especially when the choice that CPS is offering them is schools run by private companies that operate with next to no oversight from the Board of Education. What parents want is improvements in their neighborhood schools. Parents are asking CPS to reinvest in our neighborhood schools. If we have resources to fund private charter schools, then we should be funding new lunchrooms, more annexes to meet the overcrowding in schools, and teachers for the arts and music. I want to be clear. What many of the people in this room, people all over Chicago, and I believe is at stake with today's decision. You will be deciding on the future of education for generations of Chicago's children. Should our children's education be decided by the lowest bidder, or should we be looking for ways to reinvest this money into existing CPS schools to provide much-needed improvements? Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today, and thank you very much for allowing my people to come up here. So I don't know if this is a Q&A for the speakers, but I'm willing to answer any questions you may have.
I welcome board members to ask the alderman any questions they care to.
Well,
Jesse, go ahead.
clarifying point, and not necessarily to ask you a question, Alderman, but just maybe Jack is there, can answer. We're not providing any buildings to anybody any longer, correct? And they come with their own buildings, so in that sense, they're not. Okay. All right. I'm not sure if you, Alderman, you were making a point of saying that we were providing capital to these folks that we're not doing.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I just wanted to clarify that if you were under the impression that we were providing buildings and capital to these folks.
Okay.
I want to just get that point out there that we're not.
I just had to bring mention of the, Taft High School, if that was brought up by somebody else that's 6.5 miles away from this proposed site, as an overcrowded school that we're concerned about,
Got it.
You mentioned
Got
other
it.
schools, Steinmetz is, I mentioned 4 schools that are within 1.5 miles from this high school, but then Steinmetz is like 2 miles, Schurz is maybe 2.5, 3 miles, so.
I just want to clarify, because you mentioned building a school. I'm like, we're not building any schools for
Okay,
anybody.
yeah, well,
under this.
I have a good site for you to build a school at, so and that would be Narragansett and Irving, so, if we could find the funds. And that would help out a lot on the northwest side.
Understood.
I would just, the other clarification I would offer is just the accountability question, because I think, Jack spoke to it a little bit earlier in his presentation, but certainly charters are very much accountable from a performance and everything else standpoint.
Personal experience of mine, I have a charter school in my community, and I have gotten no help with the problems I've been having with them, so they didn't have to come up with any proof of anything.
Performance, yeah.
So, I mean, there was an agreement when they came in with a community boundary. They are totally disregarding the one simple thing that they agreed for, and I can get no help with this process that I've had. I've been fighting this for almost a year now with no help from the Board of Education, so, or CPS, whatever you want to say. So, and that's a fact, and everybody knows about it. I reported the school to the IG. I've been actually recently working with Jack on to try to resolve this. So recently, he stepped in and everything, but these people are just no oversight and just are doing whatever they want and running roughshod over me. So, and I don't appreciate that.
So my question is, I have asked about Prosser and the number of students that they would have on a waiting list, considering this proposed Noble Street School. And I was given the number 1,500 students are on their waiting list. What do you think could be some of their options for those students?
I'm not sure where the kids from Prosser are coming from. You would have to ask the principal maybe from the school. I don't know if he's here or not today. I know Prosser is a well-known school in the community. I've lived in Chicago my whole life and on the Northwest Side, and usually the smarter kids from the neighborhood either went to Lane Tech or Prosser. So a lot of kids that didn't choose to go to Steinmetz, they would go to Prosser or Lane. So, and that was.
Yeah.
So I'm not
So,
sure
Jack,
about the
for
1,500 where they're
verification-
coming from. Lot of kids. Also, my understanding is a lot of kids play to several schools, and I'm not sure where Prosser choice is on their wish list.
And Prosser is it's a lottery-based high school, so
Yes.
they accept students from beyond the community. But there are options for the there are 4 neighborhood schools: Foreman, North Grand, Steinmetz. All of them are underutilized.
Kelvin Park.
And Kelvin Park. They're all underutilized. So those are some of the options. But clearly, there's no need for a high school.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman, appreciate
Okay,
it.
thank you, folks.
I'm a junior at Steinmetz High School and a student organizer from the Chicago Students Organizing to Save Our Schools. We are a group of students that are not required to meet, but we do anyway because we deserve more than what CPS is giving us. This year, CPS took millions of dollars from our schools. We don't want to see this money going to charters. Building more charters is pointless. You want to build a noble charter high school right across the street of an already existing high school, Prosser High School. In addition, there are 5 other high schools within 2 miles of that location and the intrinsic charter proposed site. Calvin Park, Foreman, Schurz, North Grand, and Steinmetz are all high-quality schools that are not overcrowded. On the contrary to what Mr. Elsey says, Taft High School is at least 5 miles away, and it is not in Belmont-Cragen. Unlike public schools, charters are privately run. They do not serve all the students in the neighborhood. They push out students they don't want, and this includes English language learners and special education students, just because they don't want to lower their test scores. Our school's LSC student representative, my classmate Emily, transferred to Steinmetz from a noble charter school. She said she did not like how the school was divided students into who they thought would make it and who would not. She said she liked Steinmetz because we're like a big family, as you can see. At Steinmetz and the other existing high schools on the Northwest Side, we have bilingual and special education programs, long tradition of sports, extracurricular activities, college prep classes, and great teachers. Unlike charters, our teachers have been here for a long time and are committed to the school and community. My teachers know my brother, who graduated from Steinmetz 6 years ago, and I'm proud to say that he got
Ms.
his...
Mena, excuse me, can you please conclude?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm proud to say that he got his bachelor's degree from DePaul 4 years later. I am here today because every time a new charter opens, existing schools will lose students and therefore lose money. This is an injustice. What you need to do is invest in the success of already existing schools, not build more charters. So
Thank
now
you.
I'm telling you to vote no on the charter proposal.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Mena.
Alderman Fioretti?
I do have a written copies of my statement for the board. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, and members of the executive staff. Good morning, or maybe it's good afternoon. I join today with parents, students, experts, and fellow legislators and urge you to table this expansion of charter schools. Our neighborhood school system has already taken a damaging blow in the last year with school closings. If this charter school expansion moves forward, neighborhood schools and the students and communities which they serve will be even further wounded. In my own second ward, no elementary school in the area has escaped the impact of closings and consolidations. If you now approve the expansion of these charter schools, not even 1 year later, your argument for closing the 50 schools will appear disingenuous and irresponsible. Charters and neighborhood schools are often in direct competition for students and thereby for resources. The charter expansion will further impoverish and undermine our system of neighborhood schools and indeed the neighborhoods themselves. And I believe it will echo even further when we see the 5-year extension program for housing that the mayor will unveil on Friday. Instead of shutting down and selling off and getting rid of experienced educators, this board ought to heed the public. We already have scores of charter schools, and yet there is no real evidence of their academic superiority over the neighboring public schools. I urge this body to table for 1 year approval of all new charter schools. Instead, undertake a study of the academic performance. Evaluate the proposed locations of new charter schools in conjunction with the facilities master plan. Study the financial practices of the charter operators as well as the impacts and results of last year's school closings. Like you, I am charged with making decisions that impact the lives of Chicagoans. I share in your responsibility to oversee the spending of taxpayer dollars. I understand the enormity of your decisions that are before you, but I must appeal to you. Make the appropriate ruling. Don't be stampeded into voting for another large-scale privatization fiasco where somebody benefits. And it isn't the public, it isn't the students, it isn't our neighborhoods. I urge you to table this for 1 year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Arena?
Thank you, President Vitale, members of the board, and the executive committee. I'm Alderman John Arena from the 45th Ward, and I hear in the media and from CPS representatives over and over again that parents want high-quality choices for their children. But what I hear from parents and what they're actually saying is they simply want a high-quality education for their children. What is happening is the rhetoric of choice is being used to set up a false narrative, one that says our neighborhood schools do not provide a high-quality education, so CPS will give you a choice that over and over again is represented by a privately run, publicly funded charter school. This is not unique to Chicago. It's happening across the nation. City after city are having their education systems turned over to unaccountable corporate entities that do siphon dollars away from the classroom and serve a profit motive. The data that refutes the rhetoric that charters outperform neighborhood schools is continually dismissed. Ironically, adjusted for the disparity in funding shifts to charters over the past 10 years, it is neighborhood schools that outperform charters dollar for dollar. Charter spending increased in Chicago by 625% between 2004 and 2013. In the last 2 years alone, traditional CPS school budgets were cut by a total of $351 million, while charter school budgets were increased by more than $143 million to $570 million. Despite these cuts, we have seen our neighborhood schools produce and place students in the selective enrollment high schools at an impressive rate. Schools like Alexander Graham Bell Elementary has a neighborhood program that places students on par with its options program. But we do not hear CPS boasting about this statistic. Instead, Bell's budget was cut by $800,000 this year. In the 45th Ward, Hitch, Prussing, Beaubien, all elementary schools struggle with space constraints, position cuts, outdated facilities, and yet operate at level 1 consistently. They graduate students ready to take on the challenge of high school, and all 3 of those schools saw between $500,000 and $700,000 cut from their budgets. What I do not hear from CPS is CPS answering the call to expand neighborhood schools that represent a real choice for a high-quality education that does not require an hour commute for their parents and the students. Instead, we are here today as this board considers 21 new charter campuses or expansions, shortly after closing 49 neighborhood schools. There is no plan that rationalizes their placement through the city. In at least one case, Intrinsic, the applicant cannot even show a full year of results to justify expansion. And they will be back before you over the next 3 years seeking a total of 5 campuses. It would seem they are beholden to a business plan and not a lesson plan. Just as there are strong and weak neighborhood schools, I am sure there are proposals before you today that have merit. What we ask of you is to be very critical of these proposals. Hold them to the highest standards. For if you do not, your vote here today will reveal an agenda that the taxpayers of this city already suspect, that our school system is for sale. We ask that you push back on this misguided agenda as the body charged with oversight of CPS schools. Demand that a thoughtful, rational master facilities plan be created, one that distributes capital resources not as a reward for political fealty, but based on demographic need and an eye to the future. Use your voice to demand transparency from charter school operators. It does not sit well with taxpayers that public funds go to pay inflated salaries of CEOs of these charters while the salaries of educators are diminished. Use your vote to return resources that support struggling students who run a gauntlet to and from school every day back into their schools. Use your vote to return a sense of trust to populations that have seen the very centers of their community stripped away. Parents make choices every day to ensure a brighter future for their children. Please don't force them to choose to abandon the centers of their communities. Do not choose to starve the very thing that can so very much define a neighborhood's greatness. To my mind, that is the choice you make here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Vitale, she's here, she's number 46 on the list, but she has commitments. I was wondering if you would allow her to speak.
Please. Once we start, we have to finish.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Rubí Bautista. Y
Excuse me, what number was she?
Rubí,
46, she said.
46.
Is Ruby Bautista?
Yes.
48.
Thank you, 48.
Okay.
Mis hijos estudian en las comunidades de Belmont Cregan, en la escuela Dr. Jorge Prieto Mayan Science. La escuela de mis hijas tiene más de 2 años solicitando aulas móviles.
Good afternoon. My name is Rubí Bautista. My children go to the neighborhood schools in the Belmont Cregan community, in the school Dr. Jorge Prieto Math and Science Academy. My children's school has been asking for mobile units for over 2 years.
La razón de estas peticiones es porque a causa del cierre de algunas escuelas en nuestra área Nuestra escuela se encuentra en sobrepoblación. Está dañando la educación de nuestros hijos. Nuestra comunidad solicita que nuestras peticiones sean consideradas como prioridad. Solo solicitamos que los derechos sobre la educación de nuestros hijos sean válidos y tomados en cuenta.
The reason why we have been asking for these mobile units is due to the school closings. Our school has received more students, and is now overcrowded. And what we are asking is that you place our children as a priority, and that you hear our demands, demanding the rights for to have a quality education for our children.
Nuestra comunidad ha escuchado de las CPS, nos dicen no hay suficiente presupuesto para las necesidades de nuestras escuelas, pero nos están mostrando lo contrario al dar fondos a escuelas charters. En nuestra comunidad están abriendo una escuela secundaria, la cual no es necesaria ahorita, no tenemos sobrepoblación en ninguna escuela secundaria, dando fondos a esas escuelas, quitando fondos a nuestras escuelas.
Ms. Bautista, excuse me.
So our community.
Ms. Bautista, excuse me, can you please conclude?
So I'm translating.
Thank you.
So our community has heard that CPS has no budget to satisfy our needs, but what is clear is that now that while they say they don't have budget for our needs, they're giving away money for charter schools, and in my neighborhood they want to bring in a new high school when the need is when it's not going to relieve overcrowding in the elementary schools.
Nuestra comunidad está pidiendo ser escuchada sobre la educación de nuestros hijos. Nuestros hijos tienen derecho a recibir la educación y yo creo que las escuelas públicas tienen una educación bastante buena para que nuestros hijos sigan estudiando en ellas.
So what we're asking is again for you to put priority in our neighborhood schools, because our children also deserve, the best quality education.
Thank you, Ms. Bautista.
Thank you. Excuse me. Alderman Wagasback.
Good afternoon. I'll try to cut a lot of my comments short here in the interest of time. President Vitale and members of the board, I'm standing here today in support of many community members, 32nd Ward residents, CPS parents, community organizations, and fellow aldermen asking you today to delay your decision to expand charter schools in the CPS system. 2013 was a traumatic year for many of our CPS students and parents as we watched the mayor and the board move forward on over 50 public school closures designed to save millions of dollars and allow for more funding to be spent on our other neighborhood schools. As if that faulty decision was not enough, you decided to drastically cut the budgets of many of our neighborhood schools, even high-performing schools in my ward that have been financially supported by many of our own CPS parents to the tune of millions of dollars over the past few years. You have heard or will hear testimony today about the disastrous cuts that have been made to neighborhood schools while moving forward on a charter expansion plan that defies common sense and logic. In the eyes of many of my parents, you are further damaging CPS and the support that many parents have given to their schools over the years. That's code for you're forcing them out of the city. Along with my fellow aldermen, I encourage you to delay your decision today, undertake a real study of academic performance of charters, evaluate them together with a real master facilities plan, go back and review the charter financial practices, especially those that have refused to be accountable to any democratically elected body, much less their own community. And finally, evaluate their decision in light of the past couple years of decisions that have hurt the CPS system, unlike any time in the past. What will the next generation of students and parents think about your decisions over the past couple years and today? How will they view you in the timeline of history? This week, I heard a lot of great comments and speeches about the life, thoughts, and visions of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I don't believe we've lived up to his vision and have instead turned our back on it. One MLK quote from our county board president struck me as most relevant to today's decision. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Please remember that quote today as you decide on the charter expansion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alderman.